I've met many guitar players over the years, seriously good guitar players, yet few of them could be described as a virtuoso, a player whose technique and command of the fretboard seems impossible, seems otherworldly. One such guitarist, whose skill is beyond any doubt, is Schauss. Germain was named one of the 50 fastest guitar players in the world by Guitar World magazine. This, sometimes Berkeley professor, has composed for TV and film, published books Speed Guitar and Shredding Bach. His lessons in Guitar and Bass magazine, although in German, are must-watch for anyone interested in breakdown of shred gods such as Greg Howe, Paul Gilbert, Steve Vai, amongst others. I sat down with Germain, and this is what he had to say. Germain, great to see you.
Good to see you too, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's been a while. I think the last time we talked about getting together on Guitarmalade was at NAMM, and I was really hoping and expecting it to be in person, but the world has changed a bit since then.
Absolutely. What NAMM was that? 28? I think
18, I think.
I think 18. I didn't go 19. No, I went 19. I didn't go 20,
Sure.
which was great because everybody else got sick, and I'm like, first time I'm not going, and everything seems to be working out. And then I think I went last year. I had a gig at NAMM last year with an artist from Nashville, and it was like a short. It was like I got called up 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before, and we're like, hey, guitar player can fly out. Can you learn those 15 songs? And we have a slot at the Anaheim Hilton, and so we learned everything in those 2 weeks. No rehearsal. We just went on and played all the music, which was great. Actually worked out really, really great. And it was the best NAMM because I got paid well. I got a parking pass to the Hilton garage, and I was home within 3 hours.
That's the trifecta, right?
It's amazing. I got there, set up, sound check, played the gig, was home by 9.
That's a small miracle in and around Los Angeles traffic.
Oh, going there was a nightmare. It was like I was on a Friday. No, it was a Friday, so I forgot. But yeah, it took me like an hour and a half to go down to Anaheim from here, and that was the sucky drive. But everything else was there 6 till 9, and then anyways.
I'm curious, do they let you off the leash on a gig like that? I can't imagine they get the full Germain Schauss experience at a reading gig.
Yeah, I've changed a lot. Like I like to. I mean, I'm not really very much of a social person anyway, so going to places like this are really exhausting for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy to provide the service I was hired to do, and then literally have no interest in schmoozing or this whole thing. I know it's not a great career advice, so for everybody, be out there schmoozing all this stuff. But if it's not your thing, then find, alternative paths of doing that, because there's plenty of alternative ways of doing it. But the old school approach will be to just hang out and talk to people and stuff. But
sure. In terms of famous musician introverts, is it Ornette Coleman, or I'm confusing one of those guys? Maybe it was Oscar Peterson. Oscar Peterson was historically like not interested in interacting at all. One of those guys. I confuse those two guys. There are others I'm sure as well. Holdsworth, maybe? Holdsworth, maybe?
For sure. I think, I think it's already really exhausting for any type of character musician, delivering a great performance and then like having that little bit of energy left to just kind of function. And I think there's not many people that just can be on all the time, especially after after playing gigs and stuff. And I can't even imagine how it must be when you have like the really big gigs, and you just pumped from like playing in front of 10,000 people or whatever, and you have the whole circus around it, and you're like in this bubble. And I'm sure, and there's certainly lots of famous examples where people just can't deal with it and do terrible things to themselves. So
sure. Well, I guess that would be, so that's an insight into the definition of a introvert versus an extrovert, because I guess an extrovert would get like high off of that, get all amped up off of that kind of energy, whereas an introvert, it would like it would take it out of you. You have to have that solitude to recharge. And I'm that way. You know, I got everyone fooled, but I'm that way too. Um, but I was listening to your most recent album recently, Essence of Being, and was reminded of the first time I saw you play in person and how the technique is at such a level. It seems like your hand's not moving. Like you refine the movement, the economy of movement to such an extent. It's like you're not even moving. And I remember, yeah, that was the first time I saw you play. Was you subbed for John Finn in his like shred class at Berkeley,
Oh God,
and everyone in the class was like blown away with you. John Finn comes back the next week and he's like, "So what do you guys think of Germain?" We're like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" And he's like, "I know. I remember Germain's first lesson and he came in and I'm like, well, Germain, tell me what is it that you want to work on?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I want to learn how to play faster." He said, "Okay, show me what you got." And you play and he's like, "So yeah, so John, so I want to learn how to play faster. What do you think?" And he's like, "I have no idea how you play faster than that because I can't play that fast to begin with, and you're 18 years old." So,
uh,
um,
actually, to be honest, I was a little older.
you're older.
But yeah, in terms of economy of motion, it's funny, and I'm sure everybody heard maybe of this idea, but in my childhood bedroom, I used to have a large mirror built into like an IKEA wardrobe thingy, right?
Right.
And I don't know who said it. It was, back in the day, it was REH videotapes and all this
Sure.
stuff going from, right? And someone just had mentioned to practice in front of a mirror to be able to uh, have a visual reference of what your hands are doing without just focusing on the left or right hand. Because if you look into a mirror, you do have the capacity of seeing the whole. While as if you just practice without, you're either focusing on the left or the right hand, and you never get the whole picture together. And that really helped. Like practicing in front of a mirror um, was really good in terms of like understanding movement and coordination. When it comes to finger movements, I think it's really hard to actually control that, especially when you're going faster, because there's a lot of voluntary and involuntary movements involved. And I think these are really hard to refine. The idea of playing slow and then scaling up to fast makes sense in terms of learning techniques and, of course, learning the right notes. But I do believe once you're going past a certain limit where just where everything is automated, I think that's when it becomes really difficult to make a conscious choice
Sure.
how your fingers are supposed to move, because your fingers are just not operating with your brain at that.
Right. I guess you're ahead of how fast you can think, really. How does
Absolutely.
how does that affect when you're improvising? So that's just a pure flow state thing.
It's hard. So I'm not a big lick player. Licks were never really. I mean, I understand they're really important in terms of style and idioms within the music or the genre that you're using. But licks was a thing that never really interested me. I wanted to understand the whole thing, the fretboard. I wanted to have my technique together so that I could do anything I wanted to do. Obviously, that is fairly, in hindsight now, of course, it's fairly narrow-minded, because if I were to go on a country gig, I would have to sit down and learn all the country licks,
Right.
right? Which it happens to me. And it's a great learning experience because I have to completely go out of my comfort zone and learn the things that my brain isn't wired to do at all.
Right.
In terms of improvising, I have my things that I do. Obviously, and that's the irony of it, I have my own licks. Not in the sense of like, here are 10 notes and I play them over this chord, but in terms of like the tonality that I'm looking at. Even if it's a moving chord progression, I decide to do a scalar idea or an arpeggio idea. I do have these things worked out and lined up. So, and I catch myself doing it all the time. Like, I'm like, oh, I know this thing. I played this, I played it like a million times, maybe in different settings, but it's the same, like, thought behind it. So yeah, in the end, I play licks. So even though I didn't want to do it, so there's, I would say, in terms of free improvisation, melodically, yes. In terms of when I apply my chops, I will gravitate to the things that I have conceptualized and
Sure.
put together.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? So when we think of lick, it's like I think maybe the Chuck Berry lick or something like that. But when I think conceptually, like what you're alluding to, like the Sean Lane stuff, it's like conceptually, it's the patterns are worked out. Then like what happens is less, less of a recurring thing than just like in general the passage is very very similar. Um, Now he mentioned something, and the technique, like the parallel there, is like incredible technique. So he said that he developed the technique really early. Then after it was just how to use it in like a musical way. Did you have the same experience where you were playing at that a similar level at 16 or something?
Yeah, when it comes to chops and stuff, that was even though even though I started guitar, how was I like 12, and I did classical guitar for until I was like 15, and then on and off between 16 and later on, just for interest and being exposed to other things instead of just rock and all this stuff. But technique was something that I had early on, but I think the the understanding what to do with it was lacking. Like I could shred a lot, but a lot of it didn't make necessarily sense. I'm not talking about wrong notes or just patterns that just somehow fit. And it, I didn't have the maturity yet to understand the tools that I luckily had developed early. And that actually, to be honest, that is kind of like a curse that is following me still. Like I have to literally tell myself to shut up when I play and just focus and play something that makes sense in terms of the music that I'm playing instead of just, you know, trying to do things that are not appropriate for the moment. So
Right.
this musical maturity, I'm still working on it, and I'm 47 years old now, and it's really hard. It's still eluding me most of the time.
Only because you can't say what you want to say, or you're forcing yourself to like be more restrained.
Probably a mixture of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard when you have a lot of what happens to me. So let me just focus it for a moment on me because I know everybody is different. So I can only tell the story from my perspective. What happens to me, especially in rehearsal or live situations, when the solo is open-ended, like improvised, or I take parts of an original solo um, and then embellish it so that instead of learning the original solo note for note, I keep a little bit of whatever I do. I get panicked that I can't express the thought that I have in the moment that is happening. And then when that happens, I blank and I play stuff that may just not be appropriate for the setting. And then I usually record all rehearsals and live gigs just to learn and just,
Right.
there's plenty of cringe-worthy moments, of course. But I'm totally aware that I get panicked when it comes to soloing, that I don't have the time to express my thought. And then, of course, that's kind of self-sabotage because at that moment, all of a sudden, usually, like, in the worst case scenario, I have no clue what I'm doing. Or in a moment where I can control my emotions, I can do what I usually do, right? I go to my worked out things that I've been doing for this time.
Right. So when you get derailed like that, is it like a mental chatter, or is it like more of a physio, like a increased heart rate? Like is it mental, or is it more of like a physical feeling of anxiety?
It's just all in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at controlling. Uh, Although I think over the years I did develop some sort of anxiety that kept me from exposing myself to certain things and stuff because of the fear of a failure or all these negative things that come along with being a professional musician. But I am physically in control of my body when I'm on stage. I'm not nervous. I mean, I'm excited, but not nervous to the point where I am not capable of executing what I need to do. but literally my mind just explodes, and I have to like really work hard on not just freaking out and just, throwing the guitar down and walk off.
Right.
Goes something to that level.
Right. And to your earlier point about the mind, like you're in the moment, there wouldn't even be enough time to like course correct, right? Like, because if your fingers are ahead of your hands and you get freaked out, there wouldn't be enough time necessarily to do like box breathing or like start to chew gum or something that like is proven to calm us down a little bit. It's like the moment is so fleeting. Back to your mirroring point, I guess like certain people would say using the mirror and talking and like visualizing and talking to yourself in that way in the mirroring would like be helpful potentially. I mean, after so many years of gigs, we would hope, right? We would hope that the exposure and like just the reps and the experience and everything would help that, but maybe it can go in the opposite direction too.
It all depends on your life experience. I mean, I know that, and I see this with friends and colleagues of mine that have the opportunity to play in really high profile gigs, that there seems to be something happening to the musician in terms of performance level. And I think they're really, I mean, yes, of course, they're very lucky, and they worked hard to get such an opportunity. Of course, I'm not, but I think that when that happens, I think you, as a musician, you start to kind of make the next step into, into doing certain things just at a really different level than what you have been doing. Not saying that the level wasn't great before, but I think there's all of a sudden this jump, and it's amazing to see. And of course, performing needs to be practiced, just like anything else. Like, I don't think anybody could just walk up on stage and play in front of thousands of people with very sophisticated music, or even, whatever artist it is, to make a perfect performance. You need to be at such a high performance caliber that you can't just pull this out of your head. It
Yeah,
needs to be practiced. And rehearsal doesn't even count that way, because
sure.
we all know we can sound perfect on rehearsal and just lose it all in the gig, right?
Yeah.
So performance practice. If you have the opportunity to perform a lot, you're going to have this certain something in terms of reliability to your performance level and playing. You know,
Was there a gig where you felt that you played the best, where you're like channeling the gods and you get off stage and you know that it's like a really special moment that just happened?
it was a couple of opportunities like this for sure, where everything just comes together. I'm and I know that doesn't really help a lot, but I'm very reliant on the people that I work with.
Interesting.
Not in terms of the musicianship. I just need to have a feeling of family. Um, so obviously that's always difficult in certain professional situations, because you walk into a room and you don't know anyone, but that makes me also very picky, I guess. So again, take this as how you want. Obviously, it closes a lot of doors for me, but this is just part of my anxiety that I have to deal with, where I just lost, I guess, basic trust in people and the way they treat each other and me. So for me, playing with the right people opens up these doors where I can really just play music and not worry about what this person will think or that person will think. I'm not even worried about the audience. I'm just worried about the people I play with.
Right.
And that's kind of debilitating, right? So that's not really a good thing, but that's stuff I have to deal with.
Right. I'd imagine that was challenging coming from Germany to the States if that's something that you feel is necessary for you to perform at a high level or at your best. Was that really tricky coming to the States way back when?
No, not. I mean, that wasn't really. I worked already as a professional musician in Germany, so I did a lot of studio recordings for other artists, uh, commercial recordings like jingles and all the stuff. I had my own band that we toured with, and we played out probably 3 times a week. So that wasn't really the issue. I mean, just moving from one country to another, it doesn't even matter if it's a Western European country to America. There's a difference in culture,
Yeah.
a clear difference in culture. Um, Now, some people would say I'm very German, other people would say I'm very American, depending
Right.
on where these things are. I've been living here now more than half of my life, so the boundaries are not very clear. And apparently, I do like the different cultural aspect of America a little bit more than the very hierarchical and what's the word, stoic culture
Hmm.
of Germany. It's very different. I've always had a hard time dealing with that, even when I was living there. So for me, it was always a goal to move to America. So when I was 16, I'm like, I got to figure out how to get out of here. So that's literally how that went. So, but in terms of performance and all these different things, no, there's no difference. And performance, opportunities and stuff. I mean, everything is the same, literally. You go to Europe, you have your mega artists that draw, tens of thousands of people that are just locally known either in the country or within Europe.
Sure.
And nobody would know about it in America. And then of course you have vice versa, right? You have artists that are huge here and have never gotten promoted in Europe, and nobody would know who they are. Besides, of course, the people that are into certain musics where you have the niche market and all this stuff.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating how that happens. And then you have the breakouts and everything. But I wonder what we're missing here. Like, there's the old meme when you mentioned that, the old meme of like David Hasselhoff being big in Austria or wherever it was, and
Oh,
not knowing where that was. He's like, where is this? Where is this country? Australia.
yeah, that is such a horrible the David Hasselhoff experience. I still don't understand
Right.
where this is from. I think it was just an accumulation of Baywatch having been on a year or 2 years after its prime here in America. So it was, 89, 90, 91. Um, and then, of course, he had a record. There's a culture in Europe where you have variety shows aired on Saturdays. And Saturdays is so the opposite here in America, where Saturdays usually it's very light programming, maybe a movie or rerun of whatever, but it's not like a main TV night. In Europe, it's a main TV night. Saturday nights, it's the prime slot. So you have these variety and game shows that, of course, invite famous people to be part of the show, either as interviewee or as a guest that partakes in these shows. They are game shows and stuff. So that's how a lot of German audience would meet all these famous people. And obviously David Hasselhoff was invited to a game show and he premiered a song there. But on the other hand, we have good music too. Mr. Big came to that same show and played one of their songs too. So we have Paul Gilbert, with Mr. Big, or we have David Hasselhoff singing "I've Been Looking for Freedom." So obviously, I watched the Mr. Big performance, and the other one, I guess I caught as a rerun somewhere, and it was kind of, it's one of those moments when you get embarrassed, even though it's not you, it's just you just get embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I mean, kudos to him. It's not easy to step out of all these things, and I'm sure he had, career-wise, all these different changes to deal with. So I'm not knocking him. It's it's great that he was able to do it. I just think that that's the German stereotype that always comes along somehow. Talk about Germany, people will think the hop.
Well, I think Michael Schumacher, but the Hoff is like a distant second.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all depends on what you're in, right? So Boris Becker, for example, or Steffi Graf,
Sure.
you have the Hoff. What else was there? There's a couple of other, I don't know. Anyways, I mean, Tina Turner, she moved from America. She lives in Switzerland with her German husband.
Got it. Got it.
right? And I think she also became a citizen of Switzerland, and she rescinded her American citizenship.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I saw the special with her on 60 Minutes years ago, and she was in Switzerland with her German husband driving like a old Lamborghini truck. Do you remember those from the 80s? Ridiculous. So cool. You mentioned Mr. Big. I have a question for you because I don't have that many people that I can ask about this. But I'm looking at like Paul Gilbert solo transcriptions and like Ingve and some live Steve Vai and stuff. And I just I was wondering about the way they notate their rhythms because it'll be like 30-second note, sextuplets, septuplet, 30-second note. I'm like, are they really calculating every beat like that, or is it like they're a little floaty and the only way to write it is that it's a septuplet and a sextuplet?
You were absolutely correct. There's the Paul Gilbert, like the sextuplet, right? You know that one, and then he has another one which adds one note, and he jumps between two strings back and forth, right? So he goes, you know, and that's the 30-second note. So it's 6 notes versus 8 notes. And when he puts these in context, he actually stretches them out and puts them as a floaty 7.
Yeah.
And that was something I was, even though I mean, I ate up all these Racer X things back in the day, and I think the Intense Rock 1 video, I wore that out for sure. It was a VHS tape, right? So I literally wore it out. But these were all played without context. So, you know, I learned my Paul Gilbert lick, and then you're supposed to play it over, and you don't know where the pulse lies in. I've been writing for, oh my God, it's probably now 12 years, 13, 14 years, a guitar column for a German magazine. And in the last couple of years, we added or changed the format a little bit. So every couple of months, I do a style lesson,
right?
Which makes me sit down and listen to a lot of different guitar players, either the ones that I grew up with or completely new ones, which is a great learning experience for me because I have to listen, transcribe a lot of stuff, get the essence of ideas, licks, hear what repeats in playing and whatnot. Of course, I also write a backing track to it, so I have to take literally the entire catalog and just sum it up into 16 bars. And I did do a Paul Gilbert video, Paul Gilbert lesson. I think in September last year. And that made me, you know, I sat down and I listened to all this stuff, and that really made me realize that the phrasing that he plays is not the way you would notate the groupings of the individual exercises.
Got it.
And that's how you need to approach it, because you're playing the sextuplet licks, and then you're playing the sextuplet licks with the variation of the added 2 notes, which rhythmically doesn't make any sense. But when you hear him play it, and he always plays them in combination, they all fit over a pulse. So obviously something gets either squeezed together or, you know, elongated rhythmically to fit over the pulse. And that's kind of how he does it. He's still precise. I'm not saying he's not precise. I think he's just then regrouping things. And the larger downbeat fits again. You know, that's always the 1 to each of the phrases. So, and that's a thing that never is explained a lot of times.
Right.
Especially when you look at the, you know, different scale fragments or patterns and things, you see them isolated, and then you look at them in context, and they get summed together. They still fit, as I said, you know, the overall pulse, but they will get summed together so that the execution works.
Right. Right.
And nobody talks about it. I mean, you know, even after all this time of playing that lick or these 2 licks, I never thought about it.
Right.
So
that's good to know. So yeah, I'm really glad to finally have that question answered, because I'm like, are they really intentionally like playing a grouping of 6, a grouping of 7, a grouping of 6, and then 30-second notes, or is it just like a feel thing? And I guess like, I don't know if this is a part of what you're alluding to, but the whole like note grouping versus rhythmic grouping thing is, I guess, like a different but related topic, where it's like, are you playing sextuplets or is it 16th notes and you're just doing a note grouping of 6? That's like that Sean Wayne video, that classic Sean Wayne video. I mean, I just feel like you could get completely lost in every different variation or permutation thereof. Do you, I'd imagine it would be, I mean, you let me know what you do, but I'd imagine that like there would be the handful that you really like and you go to like 5 and 4 or 6 and 4, and then the rest are just like,
That's actually very interesting because when I first just studied all these patterns and variations and permutations, I mean, there's a clear, and I've written this in a couple of books, and a lot of other players do that, especially jazz players have more of a sensibility to it, um, about patterns, and then you apply the the three variational concepts, inversion, retrograde, inversion, that kind of thing, where you get out of one idea three variations, and then you can take these four elements and you combine them, and then you get a total of eight, right? So you have your prime, you get your retrograde, you get your inversion, and then your retrograde inversion, and then you can put your prime together and um, your retrograde inversion, and then you can put and then you do this ascending, descending. So you get all these patterns, um, and that's a great way of developing your lines and
right,
being aware of it too. I wrote, I think, 2 books on that because all the guitar books I looked at, nobody explains this. Everybody's like here, or just place patterns, at least out the patterns in the middle. And at that point, you're not really giving the student all the knowledge that the student should have to learn and then put the book aside and do it themselves. You're
right. Like
kind of
the lick versus concept thing. Yeah.
right. You're kind of connecting the student eternally to looking at this material without the student actually being in control of the material and creating it. And that's something I never liked. There's lots of books that do that where it's just not explained. And you literally, if you don't pay attention or if you don't have that drive to figure out what is happening, you literally can't do it without looking at it.
Yeah.
Which, of course, in terms of learning, it's the worst,
Yeah.
right? If I would be a horrible teacher if I would not prepare my student to literally take the lessons, get the knowledge, and then get out of, get out of it. Like I don't want to maintain, I don't want to have this really weird teacher-student relationship where they just have to come back because I
Yeah.
withhold information. That's a thing I don't get.
Which
Um,
book of yours goes into the whole like prime, retrograde inversion?
sorry,
You have a shred book that goes into that or no?
I do. It's called Speed Guitar.
Right. Okay.
Came out 2018. Yeah, I haven't written anything since. I pretty much said everything I needed to say.
Right. Yeah, that happens. That happens in from a like educational standpoint and then a creative standpoint as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So is that? I'd imagine that that would be all stuff that you write out beforehand, right? Like, are people improvising retrograde inversion like iterations of lines? That seems like mega
Well,
brain.
when I introduce students to it, we always practice it with a backing track. So it's not just to the metronome. I mean, it's a great chops building exercise, absolutely. But in the end, all these patterns and sequences only make sense when you learn how to use them.
Right.
And it's okay. I mean, I practice all of them every day, and there's some that work really well. Others get better, but I will not use them ever because I'm still gonna suck at it. But it all flows together in just learning and getting better over time. I'm not that hung up on having everything completed. Everything just takes time, and I'm sure I will die a happy man if I ever get to where I want to be. But that's never going to happen. So it's perfect.
Yeah, that's a sign of maturity there to know and accept that reality.
But I want to just quickly say, in terms of the rhythmic interpretation, you're absolutely right. That's something that is overlooked in the initial process of learning the patterns. We tend to all group them the way the pattern is. If it's a 4-note group, naturally you're going to play them as 8th or 16th note. The idea of playing it as triplets or sextuplets or even as quintuplets or whatever is something that never really, at least in my experience as a student, has never been graced. The idea of just reinterpreting the rhythmic idea of the grouping. And that's something I work on actually all the time now. Like it's interesting how the shift of the groupings over time just creates a better texture. Obviously, there's patterns that absolutely don't work, you know, but it's one of those. It's the third dimension of practicing, you know, which is awesome because you already have the movements. You just have to learn how to put them in time.
Right. At any point of like the guitars that we would think of, at any point, is it really just not possible to notate? They're just behind, or they're just like interpreting the rhythm and like being really I don't know, like generous with where the beat is and control behind in a controlled way that you wouldn't really notate it at all.
Yeah, you know, so putting it into like a systemized approach, if you're transcribing it, will sometimes be a little harder.
Yeah.
I just think of actually, and that is a very clear cut element or solo part within Joe Satriani's, what is it, Crushing Day.
Yeah.
He has a long scalar run at the end of the solo. He has a very long scalar run that is a pattern of four, right? And then he goes into this triplet thing at the very end, right? And it's the same pattern. He just goes into the triplet field.
Right.
And I think I remember trying to learn this. And that was at that point, I had the technique, but I didn't have the rhythmic understanding of it. And that was really hard to understand. Like, but now it makes complete sense.
Sure.
You know, you look at it and you're like, yeah, but it takes whatever it is, you know, we all have our own little way of dealing with all the information and our skills. For me, that stuff came later. But now I'm happy that I'm slowly getting it. So
Yeah, I'm not 47 yet, but I just turned 40, and you know it's amazing how long the
only
journey.
gets better, let me tell you that.
That's a beautiful thing. Hey, that's another mature and positive attitude. I just feel like some of the stuff I've arrived at later through being a professional musician and teaching a lot and all of that, I'm like, oh my God, if I knew it was going to take this long to get this together, oh my goodness. Um, but yeah, there's no end to it, to your point. And even if you had a specific lofty expectation and goal in mind, you're not very likely to reach that. And if you were to reach that, it would it would be another horizon that would be of more appeal to you. Um, one I was out to dinner with a childhood friend of mine, and I'd always played guitar like since I was 9, so that was like part of my identity. And he asked me, he's not a musician, but he asked me, do you remember like the different points, like the different epochs, and like when you were a beginner and then you got to like, do you remember that? And I feel like I used to remember those points in time, and it's like, oh, then I like got more of a sense of feel around this age, and then I had more of like something else going on. And now I don't remember any of it. It's just this blur. Do you remember your like the plateaus of your technique journey?
uh, in terms of technique, no, because I've always had good technique. I worked hard on it, and it's always been there. I did focus, depending on my interest at the time when I was a teenager. Like you listen to Joe Satriani, so obviously you're focusing on left hand technique more, or tapping. And then you go into like Dream Theater, and it's a completely different shift. Um, so I did have I think I focused in different parts of my early life on different techniques to be better and perfected. Um, to roll it all together was always a big issue for me because I always gone through these phases where I was just focused on picking. So I would be Trishy, Morse, etc. I would just pick everything. And then I would have to do other things where I would be focusing on legato or tapping or sweep picking or whatever. And it never happened all at the same time. It was always very separated for the longest time. And then I think literally the past 10 years, I was able to put all this together and just literally do what I needed to do in order to get the job done
Right.
without worrying about it's got to be this, it's got to be that. So it's not that long ago. And that was always one of the things that kind of upset me, where I was like, I have all this technique, I can't put it together. It's got to be this or this or that. It's very separated. It's not a coherent thought I could just utter and just utilize whatever skill I have to do. Um, so so I think in the last 10 years, all that came together and I was able to like just do what I need to do in order to get it done.
Right.
And that's nice. I'm still working. There's still a couple things that are really hard for me. Um, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm mostly blaming myself and that's a normal thing, when you're a kid, you don't know what really needs to be focused on. You just
Sure.
get into these things that you think that are important, and at some point you have a reality check and you realize that that was not part of it. Something else should have been more important, and then you try to catch up.
Right. It seems like guitar players are unique in that way that they can evolve to over evolve in some extent, and then have other elements of musicality that are extremely lacking. And I feel like that's like unique to the guitar journey, whereas someone who plays piano or saxophone, like they don't miss such fundamental things. And maybe it's like a cultural thing, or I don't even know what it is, but
Actually, I totally agree with you. I think the guitar is really odd the way it's taught. I think
right,
it's really odd the way we find naturally to the songs, the riffs, and all these things, and what fascinates us on this, and where we then take the cue of what to study and what to learn. Um, yeah, I totally agree. I think that other instruments are so much more complete in terms of um, controlling the instrument.
yeah, that is the
And
word, right? That is the word, is to have control over your instrument.
yeah, you're either great for guitar players. It's this: you're either great at soloing or you're great at rhythm. What's up with the? Because you still have to get through a 4-minute song before you get to solo, right? So unless you're going to be the one just standing in the back of the corner and then stepping up but nobody does that, right? So I've noticed that too, and I'm certainly was guilty of that too, where I would spend too much time on one thing and I totally didn't get the other stuff,
Right.
and then it flipped. But it takes so much, you know, when you're working as a musician, it takes a lot more time to do this because you don't have that time anymore to
Yeah.
spend on practicing
Right.
and just figuring things out, because you have a deadline and then you learn it and it needs to be done. And so I can only tell anyone that has the time to practice everything that there is, without worrying about neglecting one or the other, because in the end, it all comes together. It's not like just because you're practicing funk guitar, your solo skills will lack. It's just literally the same thing, but you do develop a larger understanding on the instrument, and that's always harder to catch up on when you don't have time anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, which of your teachers would you say had the biggest impact on you?
So at Berkeley, I'd say, from a philosophy standpoint, I'd probably say John Finn for sure. Because um, he's a musician that can teach you the principles of the things that you're struggling with without him having to be an expert at it.
Right.
I don't think you need to be an expert in teaching musicality or the philosophy behind music. And John is a great player. I mean, he's a shredder, and he also changed his playing style and all these different things. So I'm not saying he isn't, but for the things that I was looking for, I didn't need the technical stuff. I needed the mindset for it,
Right.
and that's something that he totally delivered, and it really cleaned up my thinking a lot. Um, and then in terms of, like, in general, like at Berkeley, would have been, and I don't know if he's still around, would have been my counterpoint teacher, Amand Qualiatine. I don't know if you
Oh
ever.
yeah. Q.
Q, Professor Q.
He's a genius.
That man, not only is he one of the kindest men, but he's also so smart, and his humor is so spot on and precise. I've never, yeah. So I've taken Counterpoint 1 and 2, sonata studies, and a couple of other things with him, and that guy just like fixed everything that was wrong.
He's a brilliant guy, you know. He's an impressive guy.
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, he's a brilliant mind for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So I mean, as I said, he fixed like sometimes he fixed just things in one class that were just was just learned wrong for years and years. So I'm eternally grateful for finally understanding all this stuff.
Yeah, he was really impressive, and Yakov Gubanov was also really, really impressive. You know, it's amazing the heights that you can reach as just a musician or an intellect or a composer. Incredible. It can be a bit intimidating if that's your proclivity. A lot of your album is very orchestral. What's your process like for writing that kind of thing?
Um, yeah, I know it's super cheesy too. Like I've always liked the mixture. I think thinking all the way back to 1980, 84, 83, 82, when Dune came out, the original movie adaptation directed by David Lynch. Toto did the score to it, right? And who was the composer? There was so Toto did the music, but I think they also had a score composer along with it. Anyways, that was an influential music soundtrack to me, and I loved that. Yeah, that combination of like rock band with big orchestra, um, and also the non-tonality in it. Because if you're in the music score, you don't have to go, stay completely diatonic. Or a
Right,
lot of times it doesn't make any sense to be diatonic because you're looking for textures
right.
and movement that gives you the highs or lows. And a lot of times you don't necessarily have that within the diatonic structure, at least in the modern sense. Obviously,
Yeah.
look at Beethoven. Of course, there's plenty of dramatic diatonic structure. I'm not, but it's different. It feels different. So that score, how old was I when I watched the movie? I think like 9.
Right.
That totally, I think even at that point, I didn't even play guitar. That had a complete and profound impact on me hearing that. So that's why I love that sound so much.
Right.
Obviously, I also have a couple of songs where it's just more of a trio setting and I just
Mhm.
play guitar to it and stuff. But when I make the big stuff, it's usually over the top. And I never start like this, to be honest. I sit down and say, I'm going to write a guitar song. And then it goes all wrong from there on,
Right.
because I think I literally wanted to just sit down and write a very balanced, pure guitar drum space, right? And then you start writing, and then things happen, and you can't fix it anymore. And that's literally how that. So that will be probably, even though I haven't released music in some time, and I've been working a lot on writing music for TV. So that literally takes all the time I have. I mean,
Right.
I play guitar along with it wherever there's guitar required for the other parts. But I would have to say 80% of the stuff I write doesn't require guitar. And then there's some specific cues. Let's say they need a song. I'll write a song and so obviously I use guitar or whatever. But um, one of the goals will be at some point down the line to write a really simple guitar album, just literally drums, bass, guitar, maybe a keyboard/piano on some places, but literally just 3 instruments. Because I'm always running into the issue of performing this stuff. So if I
Sure.
want to play it, I'll be employing 5 people also: drums, bass, guitar, 1 or 2 keyboard players, and with the financial return on things like this, I'll be
Yeah.
literally doing it as a hobby. So
Yeah.
it doesn't happen very often. I mean, it hasn't happened in a long time. So
Right. Right. Yeah. You reach a point with like playing at a loss where yeah, it becomes not worth the thrill of it anymore.
Well, if I had
Yeah,
unlimited funds, it would be an issue, but I'm a working musician. I have limited funds.
yeah. Um, yeah, that's it. So yeah, I was listening to that and I heard some of those chord changes you're alluding to. I remember the Rick Beato piece on chromatic median modulation, which I just distilled down to like every possible version of the 3 or 6 chord. That's not really like the underlying point, but it'll get you there. And yeah, I heard some of those chord changes in your album, like, oh, okay, cool. There's that sound. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it's that sound. And that's obviously from a taking some liberties in like a composing context. But if you were in a trio context, which is kind of a cool thing about like some metal and stuff like that, if they're just banging away on like a root note, then you can take liberties harmonically with like the fact that you don't have a chord to outline. You know, it's implied, okay, it's minor or whatever, but you can do so much else with it. So do you find yourself, I mean, it's kind of an open-ended question, but in general, do you find yourself like doing certain things when you have the liberty to shred over just like E to F to like A, you know what I mean?
That reminds me of what's that? Not of This World by Joe Satriani. That's
Yeah.
just E.
Yeah.
E major or E minor, whatever you want.
Goom, ka, goom, goom, ka. It's great. Great.
Great song. Um, there's a book, and I think Jacob Collier referred to it years ago, so this book isn't in print, and I forgot the author. I think it was released in the 50s.
Is that Modes of Limited Transposition, that one?
No, it's called A Theory of Harmony. I went to the library in downtown LA. They had a copy of it at the reference desk, so you're not allowed to check it out because it's literally the last copy.
Right.
Um, and it talks about negative harmony. You know, it talks
Okay,
about
right.
chords relating in fractional relationships, and that is a very mathematical but great read. And then there's a bunch of other theories and books based on that. What I take out of it is the relationship between notes and gradual shifts in movement. So a lot of times my music isn't tonal. They may sound tonal because I'm sure at some point you can explain it in any way or sense that it makes sense to you.
Right.
In the simplest case, maybe through a modal interchange.
Sure.
Um, Joe Satriani back in the day, I think, referred to it as pitch axis, where
Interesting.
you take a note and then you hang everything around this note. And he does this a lot. I think it was like a concept back out of the 80s that kind of either from MI or the Dick Groove School of Music, which doesn't exist anymore. You know, there was a bunch of trade schools, music trade schools well, MI is a college now, but back in the day it was a trade school that had composers and music colleges teaching, these classes and stuff. I try to go by texture and sound. If it's not based on a riff, I hear movements and I add my counterpoint to it and all these different things and then instrumentation. A lot of times it's very orchestral. Although when I write trailer music, I do hybrid scores, so it's orchestral stuff, and then of course whatever sounds are required, drones, synths, all these different things. So it becomes a big mash of stuff, just like what what is done these days, right? But
Right.
it's all about movement.
Right. And do you feel like you have such an understanding of that kind of thing that you can feel a movement and you know like what passage it is you want to play or what scale you want to draw from, or
Absolutely. There's plenty of spots where I'm like, nothing is supposed to be here. It's just whatever happens, this is it. There's no guitar, and I think I've learned this over the years. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, when I sat down and started to actually pay attention to music. I know it sounds funny as a musician, don't you just pay but you're just mostly busy with listening to your guitar, right? Or the instrument that you're supposed to play or figure out. I actually learned how to listen in the last 5 or 6 years, where I'm not focused on anything but the music. And that's where I take my cues from, literally. Um, it doesn't have to have guitar. That's why when I write the stuff for TV, there's plenty of times when I could say, I could squeeze in a guitar, either in a most traditional sense with distortion, or you slap on some effects and you make it more of a drone, a pad, or something like this.
Right.
But a lot of times, you realize that is your ego talking.
Sure.
And that is something I'd lost. I know exactly when things need to happen for what I'm wanting to do. So I don't need to have the guitar in hand to write music, you know. And so there will be points where I say, well, this is perfect the way it is. And then there will be stuff where I'm going, there could be a guitar, but then it's still up to debate. Would I play a solo guitar, a melodic element, a shreddy element, or would I just go with a chord or make the guitar a pad and just make it ethereal sounding? I don't know. But I don't have that urge to just kind of like blow off and just do stuff. It's
Right.
completely different now. It's more practical, I would say.
Right. Right. Do you have favorite plugins and software synths that you go to just as often as you would hit your Schecter?
So it's hard. I mean, so it's purpose driven, right? I get whatever I have to compose, I get my comments, and then I have to go for it. There, depending on the style of the sound that is looked at, I have my go-to things that I start, and then I take it from there. There's so many amazing sound libraries that you can have these days. I don't think it all depends on your workflow. I wouldn't make any recommendation to you have to get this or that. And it literally, and on the internet, on the different forums, you see people always saying this is the best, this is the best.
Sure.
Kind of get a chuckle from it because it literally is the expression of their ego wanting to be heard. There is no best.
Right.
We're at a point where things are just really good.
But I thought Ingve was the best, though.
Well, of course, that goes without saying. We haven't even mentioned him for the entire. Actually, you did before. I think you lumped Ingve and Paul Gilbert in one bag, which is funny because if you find the Mike Varney Spotlight column from 1980, 1983 or something like this, where Paul Gilbert and Ingve Malmsteen were actually in the same column.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you find that, I'm sure you can just Google it, the image of the page. It's just I think it's just you were just a one page for the Guitar Player magazine back in the day, but both were introduced in the same issue.
That's interesting. Have you played with them or no? Have you found yourself crossing paths with them? No.
I've crossed paths with Ingve rather involuntary at NAMM. I think he was sharing an escalator with me.
Got it.
And Paul, I've met a few times at meet and greets, especially in Germany when he was, doing like a clinic tour for Ibanez and stuff. Um, but, and I mean, and in these moments, I'm not really much of a. I don't search out celebrities, no matter if they're famous musicians or other celebrities, and most of the times I don't even recognize them.
Sure.
I live in LA. Everybody's a celebrity in the worst case scenario, right?
Right.
But the real ones, I don't even recognize. And a lot of times, friends of mine, have to like point to me and say, "Hey, this is this person." I'm like, "Okay." It's like they're here. They're at Trader Joe's. They're grabbing the food. They're grabbing whatever. It's not what I'm supposed to do. They're just regular people just doing their thing. So it's not that doesn't interest me at all, and I would have literally nothing to say. I mean, I understand, you want to go up and say, "Oh, you've been a great inspiration to me" and stuff, but I don't think that goes without saying. I think people at some point if they if they had a career or have a career, and they know that they're reaching a lot of people, they can already imagine that they will have some sort. You don't need to tell them that, and what are they going to say anyways? I mean,
I guess to the ego point, it's more about you than it is about them at that point. I guess you were.
yeah, that's a big realization, actually. There's a lot of things, and it goes from personal character development to musician development, a lot of things are whatever you do seem to be about yourself. The thing is, it's once you look at how the world and how life moves along, it's not about you about yourself. You know, you just I mean, you're trying to make sense of the world, but it it's not about you. You know, what's important is how you act with the world and what you leave behind. But it's not about you. So I kind of lost that whole like, you know, I want to be heard. It's like if I can do whatever I want to do and I can pay my bills, I am so happy. That's literally it. And if I make a decent impact, a positive impact all along, even better.
Right.
You know, but I wouldn't even take credit for that because it's what people want. It's what people want again. You know, I can only give what I have, and what whoever takes it, it's you know. So I'm not even taking myself that serious. That'd be crazy.
And where can people find what you've given?
So I wrote a bunch of books that are still out for sale. As I said, I left publishing, I think, in 2018 behind because I literally had enough of all that. Um, you know, I write, you know, I have my solo records out. I write a monthly column for a German guitar magazine. It's in German. So
Guitar and Bass magazine. Those
guitar
videos, by the way, are fantastic. Like the Greg Howe one I loved, and how you break down everyone's style is fantastic, even if I don't speak German.
yeah, well, the good part is if you just look at the stuff, you can just grab that. You know, you don't have to worry because I'm also not going into like details of okay, you take your finger and you put it, you know.
Right.
I mean, in the end, you have to experience it yourself. Like, what kind of direction could I give either in text or spoken form that would make you understand what is happening by then you just looking at the tablature or the notes and literally trying to emulate what you see here, and then you know. So I keep the description of these elements um, to a minimum and to a general kind of explanation because again it's pointless for me to like literally walk you note by note. It
Sure.
makes no sense. So yeah, you can do that. Greg Hall was great. It was I mean all the guys and yes, I've only done men so far, and I'm looking forward to hopefully covering a couple female guitar players. And again, I only say this because you know in the guitar world, for some reason, we are still making the distinction between male and female, right? In the end, we're all guitar players, right? So, but I'm fully aware that the coverage I've given so far has been very traditional. And I intend to change that because there's so much, mm, so many amazing players out there, despite, you know, their, their gender and, you know, all these talking points that are so important these days. I do believe, and yes, of course, everybody is, especially female players or musicians, always had it harder within the men's club, you know. And I think it's horrible, and I think they deserve, not deserve, it can't be like this. You know, it should have never been like this. If you look at the Wrecking Crew, you look at Carol Kay. I mean,
Yeah.
she's better than anybody she was hanging out with,
Right. Right.
either on guitar or bass, you know. So, and she probably had to put up with a lot of stuff back
Right.
in the 50s, you know. So I can't even imagine, um, you know, the stuff that anyways. But the great part about these articles is literally that I have to sit down and figure other people out, which must say I've never really done much in my life because I try to figure it out myself, right?
Right.
And I listen, and that again, you sit down and you listen, and then you try to transcribe um, a lot of things, and then just kind of design a solo that makes sense and that can give the essence within 16 bars. Plus, you know,
Right.
I don't know, you know, 5, 6 separate examples that are not played
Sure.
within music, but there's definitely some challenges. I think not the hardest, but the oddest thing I had to do was learning thumping when I did Tosin Abasi.
Okay.
That was never my thing. And, you know, it's great. I mean, I sat down for a week and, you know, I learned my thumping and my finger combinations for thumping, you know, and, you know, all this stuff. Um, it's really cool. Would it doesn't have place in my playing, but nonetheless, I would say it's a really cool thing to do. So
Right. Well, what a skill and a capacity and a gift to be able to unpack something like that. I mean, these techniques in general, you talk about sweeping, alternate picking, legato, and rhythmic interpretations, and then to be able to like unpack something like thumping in a week is an amazing thing. But irrespective of the fact that that's a really tricky technique, I bet in a way, unpacking someone else's technique might be easier than unpacking yourself, in the same way that like Alan Watts says it's like knowing yourself is like a fire burning itself or a knife cutting itself, and it's like in a sense unknowable, you know. But really to be able to unpack some of those guys and then distill it down to 16 bars and then present that in a meaningful way to someone else, to the guitar masses, is an incredible thing.
it's a great way to clean up your own thinking.
Yeah.
Because you literally need to figure out, um, you need to figure somebody out, you
Yeah.
know? And there's, as I said, there's plenty of music that I've never listened to, like, Animals as Leaders, even though I knew the name, I've never listened to the music. So when I made Tosin the topic of this issue, I had to sit down and listen to all the music and figure it out. I used to play seven strings a lot. Since I'm playing in a professional Meatloaf tribute touring band, I put it away because most of the stuff is, your traditional looking guitars, because I can't show up with a seven string to a Meatloaf gig. Um, Although I probably could, nobody would care. But I don't think, because we are dressed the way we're nine people in the band. We do the whole 3 hour show with everything. It would just not fit. And I would have to say also the seven string would be completely underutilized. I would have, and I don't call it an extra string usually, but I'm calling it an extra string. I'd have an extra string to deal with that literally would screw with your head when you're
Yeah.
trying to do music that has been recorded on classic six string guitars.
Right.
So yeah, but so I had seven strings, and that's great. But obviously he's an eight string guitar player, and I don't think I have enough. I mean, my hands are fairly big, but I don't think I have enough hand for an eight string, to be
Right.
honest. So that is always the scary part, right? The size of the fretboard. You're looking at this and you're like, how am I supposed to get to the strings without, like, doing all? And it's about comfort. Like for me, playing shouldn't hurt, shouldn't be tiring. You got to make sure that everything is as comfortable as possible. And looking at an eight string, I only get stressed out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I appreciate everybody doing the hard work on their instruments. It's amazing, but I get a panic attack when I see that.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's been great, Germain. I could talk to you for hours about all guitar technique and shred history.
Yeah,
what are you most looking forward to coming up?
I don't know. The year started out slow, as it's like any year. Usually January is always like, a scary part. Been writing a bunch of music for a TLC show. I got with my tribute band, we have a couple of big gigs coming up. Then I go back out to teach at Berkeley in the summer, hopefully. Right now, everything, I'm just producing a lot of content. Either, make videos, not necessarily published, or I have been kind of laying low on social media because I don't really have an interest right now. Just, how it goes,
Sure.
comes and goes. It's of course horrible to grow your audience because, you're spending 3 months of doing stuff and then you're taking 2 months off. But I'm just, I'd have to be honest. I'm just trying to piecemeal my year together. That's pretty much it. Every professional musician probably knows how that goes. Sometimes you just have no clue how the year is. And right now it's end of February. I still don't know what my year will be like, but who knows? So I'm not, that's what I'm saying. Everybody always thinks, oh, you got to be famous, or, you must be really well to do. I'm an average working musician, Joe. I make enough money to literally keep the lights on, but and that's fine. I never wanted more. I don't think I ever wanted to be like rich and famous. That was not, and I talked to a friend of mine about this, who used to play in a band back in Germany. And he was like, yeah, I never saw you as like a guy that goes for the fame. You just wanted to always do what you wanted to do and just be left alone, you know? And I'm like, now that you say it, that's kind of what I've been, what
For
I've been
people who
thinking.
for people who don't get that, that sounds so could potentially sound so negative, but to me it sounds like a beautiful thing.
It's a
Um,
totally beautiful thing. You don't have to be famous.
right,
If you do what you love and you do it, and you don't have to worry about what all the other things that take you away from music, it's beautiful because you can just be and you don't have to worry,
right,
you know. And I think that's kind of what I want. I just want to be and not worry.
great.
So as long as I can do
Well,
it
the
each
best things tend to happen when there's no expectation. So get ready. It could be changing drastically for you in
yeah.
2023.
Oh my God, no. One thing I think that's hard for all of us guitar players, and that's change. We
Yeah,
love routine, right? Routine is what gets us going. Like we practice the same thing over and over, even though we already can play it, but it gives us comfort,
right.
right? That's what, and I've noticed this with all guitar player friends and all students. It's a character flaw.
Yeah.
Like we like to do the same thing to just feel good, even though we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I guess it's like a dopamine hit. It's like scratching an itch. It's like a dopamine hit kind of thing. It's like a mini thrill. I wonder how you would think that like social media serving that for people would take away from like the general level of guitar playing. But I feel like the general level of guitar playing seems to be elevated. I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of incredible people, and I don't know if it's just a collective thing or we just pick it up from the place at which we found it, but there are an awful lot of burning people who are seem to the earlier point like musically more mature at a young age, which is an incredible thing to see.
Absolutely, and you're right. I think, and this brings it down to a Guitar Player magazine article I wrote. I read a long, long time ago. It was an article. It was an interview with Steve Morse, and Steve Morse said, you know, if we could just have all guitar players of the world just meet at one spot under a tree once a month or whatever, and just exchange stuff,
Yeah,
you know, it would all be great. And get, and that was literally that was in the '90s. You
right.
know, well, guess what? We have that tree. We have
Yeah,
the place. And I think that's exactly why everybody, well, I can't say everybody, but when I look around, I see the level of proficiency
right,
that wasn't there when I was a kid. I'm
right.
sure in rare instances, but you would never know about it because there was no way of sharing it unless you run into the person at a guitar store and you sit down and you know and shred, right? That would be the only spot where you would meet people. You'd go to a guitar store and
Yeah,
just be the nuisance of the people working there, you know, spending hours. And I did that. I have to completely admit, I would go to my guitar store in my town in Bonn. And it was a great guitar store. They had all kinds of awesome stuff. And I would literally, and did you know, I did it every day after school, Monday through Friday, and on the weekends, a couple of extra shifts.
right.
I would be there for hours. I'm sure I was super annoying.
Well, I'm
Totally.
sure they were initially very, very impressed, and then like, okay.
Okay, we've heard that. Like, can you please go? And
Well, hopefully you bought enough from them and Bond to at
you know
least
what?
keep.
I did, but they did give me some really incredible deals and opportunities to buy certain gear. Like they got I remember the guy at the guitar store got me the blue and pink Paul Gilbert model.
Yeah,
But
nice.
that was in 1991, 92. At that point, no one wanted a guitar like that.
Yeah,
And it was one of, I think, seven. I think I talked to a friend of mine in Germany who was also a guitar player. It's one of seven that was actually made to go
right.
to the European market, and he got me one. He actually had a meeting at Hoshino in Japan, and he reserved that guitar for me. I would have
Oh my
otherwise
God, that is so cool. You don't have it still, right?
no, and yeah, I dream about that guitar a lot.
Yeah.
I yeah, I got it when I was like 15 as an awesome guitar, and I sold it uh, years down the road to a friend of mine because I was just, especially I was of course moving to America and stuff. I didn't need all this stuff anymore. I literally came here with a guitar and a suitcase. That
Yeah.
was really it. Had sold everything. But yeah, so for an example, that would be I would have never otherwise I would have never gotten that guitar.
Right.
Or I got an Ibanez ART-1. That was a
Mhm.
prestige model that was released 95, 96, fully limited quantity, and only destined for the Japanese market.
Interesting.
But a few guitar traders in Europe and I think in the United States were able to grab them and export them.
Right.
I don't know if that was legal or not, but I got one of those prestige models, and it was the ART-1. You can Google it. It was a mind-blowingly beautiful handcrafted
Right.
guitar, and yeah, without that guitar store and this particular person, I would have never gotten that guitar. So time well spent.
Yes, exactly. Germain, so good to see you, man. I hope that our next meeting is in person, but if not, we'll do this again.
Yeah, well, should do, and NAMM should be happening. I mean, this year I think it's happening in April, but I'm not sure if you're coming out. I have no plans to go, but come out to California, let me know.
I
Grab
will.
coffee and some Korean food.
Excellent. Fantastic. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks, Chris.
Bye bye.
Bye.